Hello, my name is Ejire Efere and I am your teacher for agricultural science. The theme of this lesson is processes of agricultural production. And in this theme, we'll be looking at the topic crop propagation and cultural practices. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to define crop propagation, state the methods of crop propagation, and state the advantages and disadvantages of the different methods of crop propagation. Plants are living things, and as we all know of every living thing, plants need to reproduce in order to increase their population. Plants also need to reproduce in order for us to keep having them with us. The processes involved in plant reproduction is known as crop or plant propagation. A crop is a plant that is grown in the farm by farmers. In this lesson, we shall be using the term crop or plant. They all mean the same thing. Now, what is crop propagation? Like I said earlier in the introduction, it is a process involved in plant reproduction. Therefore, crop propagation is the process of growing new crops using parts of an old plant. Crop propagation is also called crop reproduction because it is a means whereby crops reproduce themselves. There are different methods used in crop propagation, and they are sexual propagation or asexual propagation. Remember, these can also be called sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Let's take a look at the different types of propagation. The first one, sexual propagation. This is the process of growing new crops from the seeds of an old crop. They plant the seeds in the soil in order for new crops to grow forth. This method of propagation is called sexual propagation because it involves the combination of the male and female sex organs found in plants in a process known as fertilization. And when this is done, it results in the formation of a seed. And it is this seed that farmers plant in the soil in order to grow new crops. It is not all plants that produce seeds. Therefore, it is not all plants that can be cultivated or grown sexually. Plants that produce seeds are called seed-bearing plants. And in agriculture, the most common types of seed-bearing plants are the flowering plants. The flowering plants are plants that produce flowers. So flowering plants produce seeds as well. Examples of crops that can be cultivated sexually are the cowpea plant, which is a common beans, maize plant, orange plant, and the groundnut plant. These are crops that produce seeds. In flowering plants, the organs of reproduction are found in the flowers, and they are the stamen, which is this organ. The stamen is the male reproductive organ, and the pistil, which is this, it is the female reproductive organ. These organs produce male and female sex cells. The stamen produces male sex cells, which combines with female sex cells produced by the pistil. These combine themselves in series of reactions to form a seed, and the seeds of flowering plants become mature and develop the ability to germinate and grow into new plants when grown by farmers. There are several advantages of sexual propagation. They are: 1, it is economical. This is because the seeds are cheap. Therefore, it is easy and less expensive for farmers to buy seeds to grow on their farm. 2, it is easy to practice because the seeds are very small. And because the seeds are small, farmers can easily plant them, store, and transport them from one place to the other. 3, sexual propagation leads to the cultivation of a large population of crops. Because the seeds are small, in a very short time, farmers can plant several seeds on a farmland, and this will lead to the growth of a very large population of crops on a farmland. Lastly, it is easy to store the seeds for a long time. These seeds have the ability to stay active for a very long time. So farmers can put these seeds in different boxes or in containers and store them in their storehouses. And whenever they are ready to grow the seeds will still be active. Sexual propagation also has some disadvantages. The disadvantages are: 1, the plants that are grown by sexual propagation take longer time for their seeds to germinate, mature, and reproduce. Plants that do not produce seeds cannot be grown through this method because they do not have seeds that can be planted in the soil. And lastly, the crops that are grown by sexual propagation look different from one another and from the parent plant. They look different in the way they grow or in the way they appear physically. Those are the advantages and disadvantages of sexual propagation. At this point, we'll be looking at the second type of crop propagation, which is asexual propagation. This is the process of growing new crops from the vegetative parts of old crops. Now, you may wonder what the vegetative parts are. They are parts such as the roots, stems, and leaves of plants. Or vegetative parts are various parts of crops other than the seeds. In asexual propagation, we use any of these parts to cultivate crops. And for this reason, asexual propagation is also called vegetative propagation. There are different types of asexual propagation. They are cutting, division, layering, grafting, and borden. We'll look at these different types of asexual propagation one after the other. The first one is cutting. And cutting is a method that involves the cutting of a stem, a leaf, or a root into several pieces that can be grown as new crops. There are different types of cutting based on the parts of the crop that is used. We have stem cutting, and stem cutting is commonly seen in the cultivation of crops such as cassava, sugarcane, and sweet potato. The second type of cutting is leaf cutting. In leaf cutting, the leaves of plants are cut into various pieces and grown in the farm. And this is commonly seen in the cultivation of a crop such as the bryophyllum. These leaves can be cut into various pieces according to their notes, and they be grown as new crops. Lastly, we have root cutting. Root cutting is seen in the cultivation of crops such as breadfruits and carrots. In these crops, the roots are divided into pieces and grown as new crops. The second type of asexual propagation is division. Division involves the use of special vegetative organs to grow new crops. Special vegetative organs are modified stems or roots of crops. There are certain types of crops that have these organs, and with these organs, farmers grow new crops. Examples of these special vegetative organs and the crops where they are found are suckers. Suckers are commonly found in crops such as pineapple, plantain. You could see the suckers of plantain crop. They usually grow beside or at the foot of the old crop. And bananas as well. You see the suckers just as the plantain suckers. The second type of special vegetative organs are the tubers. Tubers are commonly found in crops such as yam. The tuber of a yam crop can be divided into several parts and planted in the soil, and it will grow as a new crop. The next type of special vegetative organs are the bulbs. The bulbs are used to cultivate crops such as the onion. These are the bulbs of the onion crop. You can see when they are planted in the soil, they sprout and begin to grow as new onion plants. The next type of special vegetative organs are the runners. The runners are used to cultivate crops such as Irish potato. You could see? Runners are modified stems, or they are also called horizontal stems because they crawl on the soil. And when they do this, they develop roots and continue to grow. The next type of special vegetative organs are the rhizomes. Rhizomes are used to cultivate crops such as the ginger. You could see a rhizome sprouting out and growing as a new ginger crop. The next and the last type is the corm. Corms are used to cultivate crops such as the cocoyam. You could see the corms of the cocoyam sprouting as new crops. The third type of asexual propagation is layering. Layering involves the covering of a stem or a branch of a crop with moist soil. When part of a stem or a branch of a crop is covered with moist soil, these stems develop roots after a long while, and these roots can actually sustain the crops to grow as new plants. There are two types of layering. They are ground layering and air layering. In ground layering, a stem or a branch of a crop is bent towards the soil in order for it to make contact or even planted deeply into the soil. This is left for a while, say a period of about a week or more. The stem or the part of the stem that touches the soil begins to develop roots. And when these roots are strong enough, the stem is disconnected from the main plant and left to grow or transplanted in a different soil as a new crop. The second type, air layering. In air layering, the stem is not bent towards the soil. Rather, the farmer cuts a strip of bark from the stem of a crop. He covers it with soil and leaves it for a period of time, say about 2 weeks. At the end of this period of time, that part of the stem would have developed adequate number of roots, and when this happens, it is disconnected from the main plant and planted on the soil to grow as a new crop. Air layering is also known as marcotting. The next type of asexual propagation is grafting. Grafting involves the attachment of the stem of a plant which has been disconnected from its roots to the stem of another plant which is still planted on the ground. So in grafting, there is a stem which doesn't have roots, and there is another stem which is deeply planted in the soil. The two stems are combined as one plant. In grafting, the upper stem is called the scion, and the lower stem is called the rootstock, or simply called the stalk. The two stems are combined together and tied for a period of time. At the end of this period of time, they fit properly into one another and they become one plant. This is an example of a crop that was combined via grafting. You could see this is a pear gotten from another plant, and this is a stem of another plant already growing on the soil. And this is the point where the grafting was done. Grafting, as a type of asexual propagation, is used to grow crops which have special qualities but may not be able to withstand weather conditions or soil conditions. So such crops are disconnected from their roots and attached to another crop which has the ability to withstand weather conditions or soil conditions. The next type of asexual propagation is borden. Borden is similar to grafting, but in borden, it is only the bud of a stem that is attached to the stem of another plant. A bud is a small part found in the stems of plants that develops into a leaf, a flower, or another shoot. So they're usually tiny, tiny pores found in the stems of plants. When these buds are disconnected from a plant and attached to the stem of another plant and left to grow into a new branch of a plant or a new plant, we call that method budding. In budding, the stem receiving the bud is called the rootstock, as we saw in grafting. And the stem given the bud, or the bud being attached to the rootstock, is called the scion. This is the rootstock, and this is the scion containing or carrying the bud. This is a good example of budding, where a bud has been connected to the stalk and is beginning to develop as a new stem. Budding is also used for the same purpose as grafting. The bud is tied to the stalk for a period of about 21 days, and in this period, the stalk is constantly or regularly supplied with water in order for the bud to grow. And at the end of this period, the rope or whatever is used to tie them together is loosened and it is allowed to grow as a new stem or as a new plant. Just as sexual reproduction has various advantages, asexual propagation also has its advantages. I'm sure by now you would have been able to identify one or two of such advantages. The advantages include: 1, they mature and produce fruits in a short time, unlike the seeds of sexual propagation that takes a long time to produce. In asexual propagation, the crops mature and produce seeds in a very short time. They don't need to grow and mature and go through all those processes. 2, they produce offsprings that are identical to one another and to the parent plants in most cases. 3, they have the ability to withstand bad soil conditions and bad weather conditions. This is because in most cases, the plants that are propagated asexually are plants which have good quality and they are able to resist certain conditions. Lastly, plants which do not bear seeds can be propagated through this method because their stems or leaves or roots can be grown as new crops. Asexual propagation also has its disadvantages, and they are: 1, diseases can be transmitted from one plant to another. This is because a part of an old plant is just cut off or disconnected or attached to another plant to grow new plants. Through this process, if the old plant is already infected with a disease, it could easily spread to the other part of the plant that is being grown as a new crop. 2, the vegetative parts of plants cannot be stored for a long time. Unlike seeds, these parts cannot withstand or survive for a long time when stored. Lastly, the processes of asexual propagation are not very easy. It's because the vegetative parts may be cumbersome to carry, difficult to cultivate or grow, and even tedious or needs more care in handling them. The summary of all we've learned today is: 1, crop propagation is the process of growing new crops from different parts of old crops. And the 2 methods of crop propagation are sexual and asexual propagation. Sexual propagation is the method that involves the growing of new crops from the seeds of old ones. Asexual propagation is the method of growing new crops from the vegetative parts of old crops. In asexual propagation, we mentioned that the seeds are easy to carry, plant, and transport from one place to the other. The common types of asexual propagation are cutting, division, layering, grafting, and borden. We also mentioned that crops that are grown asexually mature early and they have the ability to withstand bad soil and bad weather conditions. To know how well you have learned from this lesson, I would like you to take this question. The method of crop propagation that is easily practiced and leads to the cultivation of a large population of crops is called A, asexual propagation, or B, sexual propagation. The correct answer is B, sexual propagation. We have come to the end of this lesson. I hope you have learned the different types of crop propagation and you know how they are applied. See you in our next class. Bye. Bye.